What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. What if Naruto returned to the leaf only to find everyone regretting losing him? If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. The tall blonde man looked up at the gates. How long had it been since he had last seen them? Too long, he muttered to himself as he took cautious steps towards the huge green gates. They were taller than he remembered. The builders after the Pain invasion must have done a good job. Slowly he walked forward. He lifted his hand up to shade his eyes. The sun was glaring down at him, causing small drops of sweat to roll down his forehead. He grimaced. He couldn't wait to get inside. Somewhere with air conditioning would be perfect. As usual, the gates were open, but the men guarding them were new to him. He approached them, picking up speed until reaching a sudden stop in front of the guard stand. There were two shinobi there. The one on the left was mid-30s, with brown hair cut very short. He was tanned. In contrast, his partner looked relatively young, no older than 26. He had red hair that flopped lazily over his right eye, and quite pale skin. The men at the stand greeted him with looks of curiosity. He smiled. He must have looked like quite the sight. He had been traveling non-stop on foot for days, with no time to clean himself up. He rummaged inside the backpack he was carrying. His hands closed around a scroll, and he pulled it out. Unrolling it, he showed the two guards. The one on the left raised an eyebrow. The one on the right smirked. "Nice try, kid, but that is the worst fake I have ever seen. You know we're ninjas, right? We can totally break genjutsu." The redhead brought his hands up into a seal. He attempted to break the genjutsu on the scroll. He failed. Puzzled, he turned to his older companion. "Atsuo, can you try please? It must be a very complicated jutsu." The older ninja nodded and did the same as his partner had. Again, nothing happened. He furrowed his eyebrows and tried again. Still nothing. Apprehensively, he performed a series of quick hand seals. He reached out to touch the scroll, flowing chakra into it. A few words appeared. He read them quickly, then raised both eyebrows in surprise. He looked into the face of the blonde ninja, who sighed in impatience. His partner, after reading the scroll, turned to the blonde, shocked. "You have got to be kidding me. This is a joke, right?" Atsuo continued to look at the blonde. "No, Arata, this is the real deal. We're sorry to have held you up, sir." With a flick of his wrist, the blonde re-rolled the scroll. Placing it back into his backpack, he flashed the guards a quick smile. "Thanks guys. Now tell me, is Ichiraku's ramen still in the same place it was 4 years ago?" Atsuo stood up and bowed. Arata did the same. Straightening up, Arata turned towards the blonde. "Yes, of course it is." "Awesome," said the blonde, his face breaking out into his trademark grin. He turned and started to head quickly into the village beyond the gates. He'd barely started moving when he heard the older ninja's voice. "Wait a second." He turned to face Atsuo. The man was grinning. Gesturing towards the village, he spoke. "Welcome home, Mr. Uzumaki." Sakura looked out the window of the Konoha hospital. It was another sweltering summer day, and she was stuck inside. Not that she was complaining. Today was a good day for her to be working. Work helped her forget the fact that today was the day when, 4 years ago, he had left. Unfortunately, by remembering that she worked to forget, she had remembered what she was trying to forget. "Great," she thought. "Now I'm confusing myself." She sat down on the bed she had just made. She hadn't had a break in a while, and it was the first time she had sat down all day. Sighing, she looked out the window again. There was no point denying it. Sakura would have much rather been outside, enjoying the gorgeous sunshine like everyone else, than stuck in the stuffy hospital. To tell the truth, there was hardly anyone in the hospital at the moment. With the weather so nice, there were no flu or cold cases. The ninja that were currently there were all recovering nicely. There hadn't been a lot of dangerous missions lately. In some ways, Sakura was grateful for this. It meant not a lot of shinobi were getting seriously hurt. On the other hand, it was less work for the medic ninjas, and work was something Sakura definitely needed. Sakura stood up reluctantly. She had to continue her rounds. She walked towards the door and exited the room. Turning left, Sakura headed down the corridor and immediately bumped into someone. "Sorry," she said, embarrassed. Looking up, she saw Shizune. The Hokage's assistant smiled. "It's all right. I've been looking for you, Sakura." Sakura tilted her head to the left. "Really? Is something the matter?" Shizune bit her bottom lip, and then opened her mouth to speak. She waved her hand in a dismissive gesture. Oh no, nothing's wrong. Lady Tsunade just wishes to see you. She sent me to tell you that you're dismissed from work for the rest of the day, and you are to go straight to her office at 3 p.m. Sakura nodded. Thanks Shizune. See you later. You're welcome Sakura. Remember, don't be late. Lady Tsunade will be waiting. Shizune's smile faltered for just a second before she continued down the corridor. Sakura kept walking and turned right. Was it just her imagination, or had Shizune seemed a little apprehensive? Sakura exited the hospital and pushed the thought out of her mind. She was just being paranoid. The sun beamed down on Sakura. Phew, she was hot. She decided she would go home and get a hat. She had time. Her meeting with the Hokage wasn't for another 2 hours. Sakura's stomach growled. Gosh, she was starving. I guess that's what I get for skipping breakfast and lunch, she thought to herself as she walked. She passed by a few food stands. The aroma wafted up her nose and made its way down. Her stomach gurgled in protest as she ignored the stands. Sakura paused. What was that place her old team had gone to all the time? Ichiriku's? Ichiraku's. That was it. Suddenly, Sakura craved ramen. Well, I am hungry, she thought. It was only appropriate that she had Ichiraku's ramen today. After all, it was his day. Sunshine. It was one of Hinata's favorite things. She was drawn outside on days like this. The world was a brighter place whenever the sun shone, and that made her feel good. She leaned back on her hands and let the rays warm her face. A small smile danced on her lips as she closed her eyes. How she loved the summer. Summer was picnics, day trips and longer training hours. On summer days, Hinata could sit in the soft grass of the training ground for hours, soaking in the light. A shadow fell over her face. Startled, Hinata opened her eyes to see a man standing above her. Kiba, she exclaimed, blushing slightly and scrambling to sit up straight. The Inuzuka laughed and sat down next to her. Hey Hinata, slacking off, are we? He asked, amused at her embarrassment. It was cute, the way she went red when he surprised her. Hinata smiled at him. He knew perfectly well that she'd been training since dawn. Kiba grinned and grabbed Hinata's hand. She let him drag her up. When they were both upright, Kiba pulled her into a bear hug and kissed her on the nose. It's 1 p.m. Hinata. You're working too hard. We're getting lunch. Hinata giggled and slapped him gently on the arm. He growled softly and let her go. Hinata linked her slim arm through his, and they set off. They'd been dating for 3 years, but Kiba still couldn't quite shake the feeling that he was dreaming. Every moment he spent with her felt slightly surreal, like it couldn't possibly be true. He'd watched his shy, stuttering teammate grow and become the beautiful person she was today. She was still shy, but dramatically less than she had been before. She still stuttered, but only when she was really flustered. She had changed a lot, gained a lot more confidence over the past few years. Kiba likes to think that it was his influence that had done it. She was his now. It had taken years, but finally she was his. Kiba? Asked Hinata. She was looking at him, slightly bemused. Kiba realized he'd been staring at her for the past 5 minutes. Sorry, he grinned. I was just so distracted by this amazing, beautiful, confident girl that seems to be attached to me. Hinata laughed. He loved it when she laughed. It was a gentle noise, but full of joy. Out of all the sounds in the world, it was his favorite. The two had reached the main streets of Konoha. Everyone seemed to be out today, enjoying the weather. The village was bustling. Kiba stopped and spun Hinata around to face him. Have I ever told you how much I love you, Hinata? He asked, knowing full well that he had. Hinata had just opened her mouth to answer when she froze. In a second, Hinata's face had gone from clearly happy to shocked. Her body visible tensed. Kiba was worried. Hinata? Hinata, he said, gently grabbing her shoulders. He shook her lightly, and she snapped out of it. Hinata? What just happened? Are you okay? Asked Kiba anxiously. I'm fine Kiba. Iju thought I saw. Never mind. It's nothing. She smiled weakly, eyes wandering. She was stuttering again. Kiba frowned. Something had happened. What had she seen? She'd been perfectly content, listening to Kiba tell her how much he loved her. She'd looked at him, then out of the corner of her she had seen him. A tall man, with bright blonde, spiky hair. The clothes were no longer orange, and she'd only caught a glimpse of his face, but she was sure. The bright blue eyes. the whisker-marked cheeks. It was Naruto. She would have recognized him anywhere. But, it simply wasn't possible. Naruto had left Konoha 4 years ago. He had cut off all contact. None of them, bar the Hokage, had heard from him in years. It all came rushing back. The feelings Hinata had managed to hold in had broken through her mental barriers, flooding her mind with memories, emotions. Love, despair, respect. It confused her to no end. She loved Kiba, not Naruto. Not the boy who had left them all behind. Who had never acknowledged her feelings. Damn it. No, this couldn't be happening. Naruto was not back. She'd been imagining things. There was no possible way for Naruto Uzumaki to be back in the Leaf Village. Hinata? Hinata. She felt hands grasp her shoulders and she was literally shaken out of her trance. Kiba was looking at her, concern plastered all over his face. A small amount of relief showed when she looked at him properly. Hinata? What just happened? Are you okay? He asked, clearly worried. I'm fine, Kiba. Zhu thought saw, and never mind. It's nothing. She shot him a smile. Her eyes drifted on their own accord, searching for another glimpse of whatever that had been. She had to focus. She willed her eyes to stop moving. Shakily, she looked at Kiba. He was frowning. She smiled, a stronger one this time. She took a deep breath. I'm fine. Let's go. He didn't seem to believe she was okay. Hinata tiptoed and kissed him lightly. It seemed to reassure him a little, but he was still uneasy. He slung his arm over her shoulder and she snuggled into him. He kissed the top of her head. She sighed. It didn't matter whether she had seen what she thought she saw. He simply didn't matter anymore. Tucci laughed. Glad to see you've still got that great appetite. His daughter, Ayame, brought another bowl of ramen over. Naruto thanked her and picked up his chopsticks. He slurped the food down, while the father-daughter team watched in amusement. He had been gone a long time. They had missed him. Finishing his ramen, Naruto exhaled loudly and slammed the now empty bowl onto the counter. He beamed at Tucci and Ayame. Have you had enough now? Joked Ayame. Shush Ayame, don't hurry him. Tucci smiled and put down the ladle he was holding. It's good having our best customer here again. We were worried you would stay away from the Leaf Village forever. What brought you back? The man had said this in a light-hearted, jovial tone. He was surprised when Naruto tensed up. Was that regret in his eyes? As quick as Naruto's reaction to the question had been, his reaction to the reaction was faster. In an instant he was smiling widely again. He chuckled. Tea was your ramen, Tucci. Ichiraku's was calling me, and I had no choice but to listen. Pleased, Tucci picked up his ladle and filled another bowl with ramen. He handed the bowl to Ayame, who placed it down in front of Naruto. Naruto looked at Tucci. The older man pointed at the ramen. It's on the house. Go on, eat up. Naruto grinned and started to eat. Just before he fug in though, he paused. Thank you, Ayame, Tucci. You guys have always been good to me, he said, voice surprisingly gentle. Gently, Ayame patted Naruto on the shoulder. You're welcome, Naruto. It's been a pleasure. Naruto nodded slightly and began to eat. Walking along the familiar streets, Sakura reminisced. Her memories drew her back to the days when she was just starting out as a genin. She had been so, well, happy back then. But she had also been naive. During those days, everything was so simple. Team 7 had been together in everything. It may not have seemed so sometimes, but they had been incredibly close. But then Sasuke had to go and wreck everything. Sakura clenched her fists. She had been so sure he would come back. Now, she knew better. He had betrayed them all, betrayed his village. So much had happened after that bastard left. The Akatsuki, the invasion of Pain and the Fourth Great Shinobi World War. These events had marred Konoha forever, leaving it a much grimmer place than before. Or at least, that's what it seemed like for Sakura. Maybe Konoha hadn't changed. Maybe she'd been the one who'd change. She laughed bitterly. Of course she had. She hadn't been the same after Sasuke left. She had striven to get stronger, believing she could bring him back. It had been no use. She had been the last person to give up on Sasuke. The only person who held on to hope after that, well, that had never given up. Even when it was clear that Sasuke would never come back, he had believed. But the moment she had given up hope wasn't when Sakura had seen Konoha change. It had happened after the war. Madara Uchiha had finally been defeated, in a huge fight that scarred the landscape around it. With the insane man finally slain, his defeater had left to pursue Sasuke and had not come back. Yes, it had been when he left. That was when, through her eyes at least, Konoha had dimmed. Breaking her train of thought, Sakura found that her feet had taken her straight to where she wanted to go. The sight of the familiar stand was comforting, the smell delicious. For the first time in a little while, Sakura grinned. Sakura stepped inside and took a seat at the counter. There was only one other person in there, seated down the far left of the counter. Ignoring the other customer, she waved to Ayame. Sakura did not eat at Ichiraku's a lot, but she knew Ayame, having hung out with her a few times. Ayame came over, wearing a perplexing look. She kept glancing over towards Sakura's left. "Hello Sakura, I haven't seen you in ages. How are you?" asked the girl, eyes darting to the left, and then back to Sakura. Why was everyone acting so strangely today? Was it just a vibe she was giving off or something? Deciding to ignore the girl's anxiety, Sakura proceeded to make small talk. "Oh, I'm fine thank you. Can I get an order of?" Sakura? Startled, Sakura turned around. She was staring into the chest of a man. Sakura swore. How did the man get so close without her noticing? How did he know her name? Slowly, she looked up at the man's face and gasped. Naruto?" she stammered. "Oh god, what the hell? He wasn't supposed to even be in the village." The blonde shinobi was taller and not wearing his trademark orange. That explained why Sakura hadn't even given him a second thought when she came in. He was wearing rather inconspicuous clothing. Black pants and a gray tank top, and carrying a navy blue backpack. The hair was not as wild or spiky as before, but Sakura imagined that under the dust and grime, was still the same bright yellow. His face was thinner, like he'd been eating little and moving lots. His skin was sun-kissed, showing a long time spent out of doors. All in all, he was most definitely Naruto Uzumaki. But a different Naruto Uzumaki than the one she remembered. He was more composed. Before, it had seemed like Naruto was nothing but pent-up energy, ready to explode into action at any point. Now he carried himself like someone old beyond their years, almost a little weary. His eyes, once full of an uncontainable joy and determination, were too sharp, too focused. Now they betrayed little emotion. The blue pools were too deep to read, but there was an odd, faraway look. All at once, she felt herself being pulled into a hug. Sakura made no attempt to return it or escape. Naruto released her and held her at arm's length. Sakura felt herself being studied. She couldn't move. Her body wouldn't let her. Slowly, she watched Naruto's face break into a grin. He let her go and reached one hand up to scratch his head. Sorry about that Sakura," he said nervously. Sakura nodded in response. Naruto felt a fist hit him in the face. He hadn't been hit hard enough to be knocked over, but it had hurt. A lot. He rubbed his cheek. Sakura stood and stared at her right hand. Quick as a flash, she turned and walked away. "What do you mean, he's back?" said the blonde kunoichi, confused at her friend's words. Sakura, still stunned, sat on Ino's couch. "I mean, he's here, in the village, right now." Ino looked suspicious. She raised an eyebrow at her friend. "Are you positively sure Sakura? I mean, no one's heard from him in 4 years. What are the chances he'd come back now? I don't know why he's back. All I know is that he hugged me, said 4 words to me, and then I assaulted him in the middle of Ichiraku's." Ichiraku's? Typical Naruto. Sakura sat there, hugging a cushion to her chest. Ino looked defeated. Her and Naruto hadn't been the best of buds, but even she'd felt abandoned when Naruto had left. She couldn't imagine how Sakura must have felt. He had been her teammate, and probably one of her best friends. For Sakura it must have been like losing Sasuke all over again. Sometimes, Ino missed Naruto. She didn't think about him very often, but there were moments when his absence just didn't feel right. The village wasn't the same without that knucklehead. But then again, his departure had been inevitable. He was destined to go chasing after Sasuke. Sasuke? Ino's eyes widened. She gasped, and Sakura looked up. "Sakura, yeah? When Naruto left, do you remember what he said?" Sakura snorted. Of course she did. It was raining. Strange, considering it was the middle of summer. The shinobi stood at the gates leading out of Konoha. He was still, not making any effort to get out of the downpour. Head bowed, he just stood. Sakura walked him. She was carrying an umbrella. It was yellow. For no apparent reason, Naruto had called her out to meet him there. As she approached him, he looked up with a wistful smile. Sakura noticed that he was carrying a blue backpack. Naruto. Sakura, I'm glad you made it. Sakura looked at the 16-year-old shinobi. His face, it was unreadable. Sakura felt cold all of a sudden. What's going on, Naruto? She asked gently. The blonde remained silent, eyes downcast. Sakura took a step closer. Naruto, she repeated. He looked up and met her eyes. Softly, he spoke. I'm leaving. Sakura swore she had heard him wrong. You're what? The boy broke eye contact. He looked down, staring intently at the puddles. I'm leaving Konoha. Sakura froze. A sense of déjà vu washed over her. It was happening again. She had to ask, why? Naruto raised his head. Sakura felt his gaze pass through her, like his wasn't focused on her. I'm going after Sasuke. I'll bring him back. Don't do it, Naruto. There's no point, he's crossed the line. No. He said that last word forcefully, almost shouting it. I will never give up on him. I made a promise to you that I would bring him back. Sakura sighed, reaching out to place her hand on his shoulder. He flinched away. I already released you from your promise, Naruto. Please, don't. She pleaded with him, silently. He remained unmoved. Then, quietly, he said, I need to do this. I never break a promise. If finding him means leaving my life, my village and the people precious to me behind, then I'll do it. I'll do whatever it takes to bring him back. He turned away from Sakura and started to walk away. After about 5 steps, he turned back and yelled something at Sakura. Don't try to stop me. Don't try to find me. I don't want you to. With that, the blonde left through the gates of Konoha. Sakura remained rooted to the spot, alone. Left behind again. As Naruto's first foot hit the ground outside Konoha, the world faded for Sakura. The color and vibrancy leached out, leaving only a stark gray land in its place. How could she forget? It had been one of those influential moments that defined her life. Her decision at that moment, she always wondered whether she made the right choice. She should have tried to stop him. She should have run after him and begged him not to go. But she didn't. She just let him leave. She had been the last to see him. Aside from the Hokage, he had told no one else that he was going. She'd been the one to tell all their friends he was gone. The experience hadn't exactly been pleasant. She'd told them everything, every word he had said to her. Sakura shivered, remembering those words. I'll do whatever it takes to bring him back. Realization dawned. Naruto was back. But Sasuke wasn't. Oh God. Now it made sense. That was why he was back. That was why he looked so different. Shaking, she raised a hand to her mouth. It couldn't be. Ino walked towards Sakura and sat down next to her on the couch. She hugged the pink-haired girl. Don't cry, please. Maybe it's not what we think. He might have another reason for coming back. Ino didn't believe herself. Her words sounded flat. She knew that the only reason Naruto would come back alone was. No, said a muffled voice. Letting go, Ino looked at Sakura. Her friend was still hugging the cushion. Actually, hugging wasn't the right word. Crushing it to death with her monstrous strength would have been more appropriate. Sakura shook her head, face blank. It has to be. There's no other reason he would come back. Dropping the now severely deformed cushion, Sakura stood up and headed for the door. Ino followed, and grabbed Sakura's shoulder. The girl spun around quickly, still wearing that mask of perfect calm. Don't think like that. You don't know for sure. No, I do. It's the only explanation. Thank you, Ino, but I have to go. I have a meeting to attend to. Wrenching her shoulder out of Ino's grasp, Sakura opened Ino's front door. She left, shutting the door behind her. Ino sighed. That knucklehead had been back for less than an hour, and he was already stirring everything up. Sakura was upset now. After a brief internal argument, Ino knew what she had to do. Grabbing a sun hat, Ino left her apartment, carefully locking the door behind her. Putting the hat on, she leapt up onto the rooftops of Konoha. She could see the bright pink of Sakura's hair, weaving her way through the masses. Hopefully, Sakura would be going to the Hokage. Ino pushed the thought away from her mind. There was no time for memories or feelings. She had to do what was needed. First stop, the Akamichi residence. Sakura wandered the streets of Konoha in a daze. Her head hurt too much to think. She just wanted to go home, crawl into bed and stay there forever. She knew she couldn't. It was almost 3 p.m., and the Shizun's tone of voice had made the meeting sound important. Sakura couldn't just skip out on Lady Tsunade. Right, she decided. I'm going to see Lady Tsunade, then I'm going home. The Hokage's office had been rebuilt after the Pain invasion, but it still looked exactly the same. Tsunade had said something about nostalgia when asked why she hadn't changed the design. Sakura stepped into the building, past Kotetsu and Izumo, who nodded. They must have known she was coming, and told to let her in without protest. She walked into Tsunade's office. The Hokage was sitting at her desk, intently reading a scroll. She had the strangest look on her face. Concentration, mixed with worry? Anger? Pain? She hadn't noticed Sakura enter. Sakura coughed quietly. Startled, the Hokage looked up and immediately her face straightened out. She smiled, putting the scroll aside. Sakura, you're here. That's good. We're just waiting on a couple of people, then we can start the meeting. Sakura nodded, more instinct than an actual reply. She looked towards the door. Lady Tsunade, may I ask what this is about? Tsunade leaned back in her chair. You'll find out in a second. Kakashi, this must be a record. You're actually on time. Startled, Sakura looked back towards the Hokage and saw a masked man behind her. It really was unusual for Kakashi-sensei not to be late. Kakashi smiled behind the mask. Now Lady Tsunade. How could I be late for something this important? He stepped out from behind her desk and stood next to Sakura. He nodded towards her in greeting. Hello Sakura. Can't say I've seen you in a while. It's nice to see you too, Kakashi-sensei. Sakura turned back towards the Hokage. You said that 2 more people would be joining us. Kakashi's one. Who's the other? Tsunade winced. She had really been hoping she wouldn't ask that. A voice from the door spoke. I guess that would be me, huh Sakura? Sakura spun around to see the disheveled blonde in the doorway. He walked quietly towards them, stopping in between on the other side of Kakashi. He avoided Sakura's gaze and Sakura avoided his. Turning to the copy nin, Naruto greeted him. Kakashi-sensei. Long time no see. Kakashi was surprised at the emotion he felt from seeing Naruto. It was not anger or joy. It was simply relief. He would never say, but having 2 of his students, one Obito's relative, and one his sensei's son, leave the village behind without saying goodbye, really hurt. At least Naruto had come back, alive and seemingly unharmed. Kakashi was simply grateful for that fact. Not that he was going to tell Naruto. Naruto, he stated, turning his head back towards the Hokage. Naruto's face fell. It looked like neither of his teammates had forgiven him for leaving. Sakura had chosen to express this with a left hook to the face, and Kakashi had simply chosen impassiveness. Naruto wasn't sure which hurt more. Ahem. Naruto turned his head to see the Hokage watching him. Right. Sorry Granny Tsunade. He mumbled. Thank you Naruto. Tsunade sat up straight. As you, Kakashi and Sakura, just found out. Tsunade was interrupted by a snort coming from Sakura's direction. She glared at the girl, who apologized. Sorry Lady Tsunade. I found out about an hour and a half ago. Tsunade raised her eyebrows. Damn it. She'd been hoping that no one would see Naruto until she officially announced that he had returned. She noted the distance and tension between Sakura and Naruto. It seemed their earlier encounter had not gone so well. Tsunade sighed and continued to talk. Well, as I was saying, Naruto Uzumaki has returned to the Leaf Village. With his arrival, comes certain news about your former, teammate. Tsunade leaned forward and steepled her fingers. She took a deep breath in as she studied the faces of the shinobi before her. Sakura was biting her lip, with an anxious look on her face. She was jumpy but didn't seem very surprised. Tsunade knew her apprentice well. Sakura was logical. She had met Naruto earlier and had also been the last to see him go. The fact that Naruto was at the meeting, combined with her earlier meeting and Naruto's last words, must have led to the conclusion that this meeting would be about Sasuke. Kakashi Hitaki, like the experienced ninja that he was, showed no signs of surprise, aside from a slight raising of eyebrows. Naruto on the other hand, was agitated. The young blonde had always been good at hiding his emotions, but those that knew him well could always tell what he was thinking. Tsunade avoided looking directly at each shinobi before continuing. With a grave tone, she spoke. It seems that Sasuke Uchiha, former shinobi of Konoha and member of Team 7, is dead. Ino stood by the wooden posts in the 3rd training ground. She'd been waiting for a while, but for once, she didn't mind. She was too agitated to care about people being late. She fixed her already perfect ponytail. They would be here soon, right? Ino felt a presence behind her. She turned around to see Choji. With a quick smile, she closed the distance between them and kissed him lightly. Choji, thank God you're here. Did you do it? The plump man smiled widely. I did what you said. I told Shino and Lee to spread the word. Everyone else should be here soon. Ino smiled. Thanks Choji. Choji sat down and beckoned for Ino to sit next to him. She shook her head. In a second, I want everyone else to get here. Choji could feel Ino's anxiety. The blonde was fiddling with her hair, tightening and retying her ponytail. Ino, are you okay? He asked, concerned about her behavior. I'm fine. Just impatient, that's all. Ino lied with a smile. She was worried. Normally, Ino loved to be the first to hear any piece of gossip. But this time, she really didn't want to be the one telling everybody else the news. Okay, if you say so. Choji knew she was lying, but he'd learned not to push her. If Ino didn't want to say why she was so flustered, then he would just wait. Choji settled into the grass and got out a bag of chips. He may as well snack if he was going to have to wait. The next to arrive were Neji and Tenten. The newly engaged couple had arrived arm in arm, Tenten looking slightly angry. Can you believe him? She asked Ino, referring to her fiancé. Shino, of all people, comes up to us while we're training and says we need to come to meet here. Neji, however, says that he'd rather train, so we'd be another hour. I did not say I would rather train. I said that I would like to finish my training first. Neji protested. You trained for 6 hours before lunch. You needed a break, rebutted Tenten. Ino could sense that they'd been arguing about this all the way to the third training ground. Neji rolled his eyes. Well, after you threatened me with kunai, I decided to cut training short. Are you happy? Tenten kissed her fiancé on the nose and grinned. Yes, very. Neji smirked. It seemed their argument was over. He turned to Ino and Choji and nodded in greeting before sitting down. Tenten followed his example and looked up at Ino. What's this about? Shino said it was really important. Ino opened her mouth to answer, but was interrupted by the arrival of Shino and Sai. The quiet bug ninja sat down without a word and nodded, like Neji. Hello, said Sai. It is nice to see you. The artist smiled and settled down next to Shino. Ino watched the two. Shino was the same as ever, if maybe a little more open. He had ditched the hood and was back to just a high-collared jacket. Sai had improved in leaps and bounds since they had first met him. He still had a tendency to say inappropriate things, but he was much better at expressing emotion now. Shino and Sai had struck up a strange but functioning friendship. Neither were the most socially conscious person in the world, and neither seemed to mind the other's little quirks. It was kind of cute in Ino's eyes. Sai, Shino, glad you could make it. Shino acknowledged her greeting, then looked towards Shuige. I have done as you asked. I see that those I informed are already here. Choji grinned at the bug ninja. Thanks Shino. For a few moments after that, there was silence. Until of course, Lee arrived, dragging Hinata and Kiba behind him. Good afternoon everyone. What a brilliant day for a meeting of Konoha's most youthful shinobi. I am here as you asked Choji, and I have done my duty. The other person should be here soon, he is just a little behind. Quote, Choji thanked Lee, who sat down between Sai and Neji with a big smile. It was no problem my friend. It would have been most rude to deny your request. Kiba sat down next to Shino, and Hinata next to him. He draped an arm over her shoulders. Turning to Ino, who was the only one still standing, he spoke. What's this all about? Lee came and literally dragged us out of a cafe where we were eating lunch. Ino sighed. Lee must have been a bit too enthusiastic about the task Choji gave him. Sorry Kiba, Hinata. The shy girl shook her head. It's fine Ino. Lee did say it was very important. Though, I would like to know why. Ino looked around. Well everyone's here. Wait. Everyone turned to Lee. Sakura is not here. Where is my beautiful cherry blossom of spring? She's at a meeting. Besides, she doesn't need to be here. She already knows. Knows what? Asked Kiba. Ino started again. Well everyone's here so. Ino? This time, it was Choji. Ino, Shikamaru's not here yet. At the mention of his name, everyone tensed and looked at Ino. Her eyes were narrowed. The room was silent. Tsunade waited for Sakura and Kakashi to process the revelation. Of course, said Sakura quietly. She turned to Naruto. That's why. That's why you came back. Naruto nodded slowly, eyes cast down, refusing to make eye contact. Did you kill him? It was Kakashi, voice cold, contained. Naruto didn't answer. Naruto Uzumaki, look at me. Hesitantly, he looked up. Kakashi locked eyes with him. Naruto, did you kill Sasuke? Naruto swallowed and shook his head. No, I didn't kill him. But I might as well have. What do you mean? Asked Kakashi, still icy. Naruto was still, but he began to speak. 4 years. It took me 4 years to find him. It was a few weeks ago. I had caught up, and we were fighting. It was one of Orochimaru's old bases. Tsunade hissed. She would never forgive that snake bastard. We had been fighting for a long time. We were both exhausted, weakened. It was nearing the end. Or I thought it was. Naruto stopped, and looked towards Tsunade. The Hokage nodded for him to continue. It was down to the wire. I didn't want to kill him, but he wanted to kill me. He tried to use Amaterasu on me, and he missed. The beams caught fire and started to burn. I threw a mini Rasen shuriken at him, and it hit, but only his leg. It knocked him over. I ran towards him. I needed to get him outside. He tried to use Amaterasu again, but he must have been out of chakra because it didn't work. Naruto winced. Sakura and Kakashi watched him intently. Our jutsu, they were tearing the place apart. The base was already in bad shape, but now threatening to crumble on top of us. I kept yelling at him, trying to make him realize, but he wouldn't listen, so I started to approach him. I had to get him outside before the place collapsed. So I ran, but he stopped again. He was shaking. Sakura approached him and put her hand on his shoulder. My attack must have gone through and hit the beams behind him. They just collapsed. I cried out, but he didn't notice, or he ignored me. He was too caught up in trying to attack me again. The roof was only being held up by those beams. I thought they would hold, but his jutsu had burned the wood up and mine had sliced right through them. The roof it collapsed. It was too late. I kept screaming at him to get out of the way, but he wouldn't. By now, Naruto's voice has dwindled down to a whisper, and he was looking at the floor again. The ceiling was made of stone, it fell and hit him. I saw his face. I saw his expression when he fell. I heard his neck snap. Sakura gasped and bit back a sob. She grabbed Naruto's arm. Kakashi approached the two of them. He knew the pain of having someone so close die. He never thought it would be one of his students. Sasuke may have been a traitor now, but once he had called Kakashi sensei. I couldn't save him. I couldn't save my best friend. Nothing moved, save for a tear, which fell from Naruto's face to the floor. He had failed Sasuke, failed to bring him back. Now he was gone forever. Kakashi placed a hand on his other shoulder, and his other hand on Sakura's shoulder. The three stood there. Tsunade spoke, not wanting to interrupt the team. Naruto, how did you survive? If the roof collapsed, why are you still here? Not looking up, Naruto spoke. The roof fell, but I wasn't hit by anything as big as the piece that got Sasuke. Was badly injured and knocked out, but the Kyuubi must have healed me or something. When I came to, I was under rubble, but I had no damage from the roof actually falling. I guess I just got lucky. But Sasuke didn't. He spat out the last sentence. It was full of guilt and anger. Sakura hugged him gently. It's not your fault, Naruto. Thank you, Sakura. His voice was quiet, disbelieving. Are you sure he's dead? Asked Tsunade. It was an insensitive question, but she needed to ask it. Naruto nodded. After I woke up, the first thing I did was to check on Sasuke. Where he'd been, it was a pile of stone and wood. I dug through it, calling his name. He didn't answer. Eventually, I got to the bottom, and he was there. His neck was broken. I took him, and I buried him in the woods nearby. I couldn't bring him back. The blonde looked up at Sakura, nothing but pain on his face. I'm so sorry. Where was he? It was cold. Dark and cold. He was stuck. He tried to move his fingers, but he found he could only wriggle them slightly. Okay, that was progress. All he had to do was wait. He paused. There was nothing. He couldn't hear anything, or sense the chakra of anyone else. He was alone. Good. That meant, it seemed everything had worked out after all. The atmosphere in the room was heavy. Tsunade felt it settle on her shoulders, a blanket of grief and misery shared by the three other people in the room. Silently, she stood and left the room. It felt wrong being there with the three of them. She closed the door behind her, leaving the remains of Team 7 to their grief. Walking past, she instructed Kotetsu and Izumo not to let anyone else in. "May we ask why, Lady Tsunade?" asked Kotetsu. Tsunade shook her head. The pair shrugged and remained behind as she walked out of the building. Oh God! Tsunade realized something. It had been hard enough seeing Sakura and Kakashi take the news, but now, because she was the Hokage, she was going to have to inform the rest of Konoha's shinobi. She had to tell them that the last Uchiha was dead. Tsunade could see that the next few days would be hectic. First, there would be the public assembly to inform Konoha. Then days of deliberation over things like Sasuke's funeral and/or memorial service, what to do with the Uchiha compound and whether to put his name on the memorial stone. Then of course, she would have to send hunter nins out to find Sasuke's body. She made a note to ask Naruto for more information about the location of his grave later. But first, she had to let him grieve. It was over. Sasuke was dead, and Naruto was home. There didn't need to be any more fighting. The source of all her pain and sorrow was gone. But as she stood there, head bowed in the Hokage's office, Sakura felt almost nothing. As Naruto had been telling his story, she'd felt this sense of anticipation. She was shaking, overcome with sadness and shock. Although, all through, she'd known where it had been leading. It was like she'd read the book, and already knew the end. When she'd heard him say that Sasuke was dead, all of that emotion seemed to recede. The finality of the statement, the way he'd apologized to her, he'd been so broken up about it, while she simply went through the motions. She should have been angry he was dead. Or relieved that Naruto was back. She could have been joyful, shocked or at least sad. But there was nothing. There was just this emptiness inside her, a void where some emotion was missing. It wasn't right. Something didn't feel right about Naruto's story. She said nothing about this. She couldn't doubt Naruto now. Not while he was so broken up and shaken. She had to be crazy. There couldn't be something wrong with what Naruto had said. Sasuke was dead, and that was that. So why didn't she feel something other than doubt? Naruto, his best friend, and Kakashi-sensei, his old teacher, they were grieving for Sasuke. But her, the one that had claimed to love him more than anyone else? Well, she didn't feel anything, but a nagging voice in her head telling her something was off. Sakura looked up. The masked man had removed his hand from her shoulder. In a rare sign of affection, Kakashi-sensei stepped closer to the shaking blonde boy and hugged him. For a moment, Naruto fell silent. He tensed up, not quite sure what was happening. But that moment was fleeting, and he began to cry. Kakashi didn't let go. It was like in that one hug, Kakashi was expressing all the attention and love that he had failed to give his sensei's son for 20 years. Sakura looked away, feeling like she was seeing something too private. This was their moment. Kakashi released Naruto and stepped back, unsure of what to do now. The blonde was no longer shaking as bad as he had before. "Thank you, Kakashi-sensei," he said softly, voice full of gratitude, looking the man straight in the eye. Kakashi did not say anything in reply. His one eye showed only regret. The man had let down that mask of indifference. "Naruto, Sakura," said Kakashi. Sakura turned back towards the pair. "I'm sorry." Sakura looked surprised. Naruto frowned in confusion. "Sensei, what do you have to be sorry for? I'm the one that couldn't. I have everything to be sorry for," Kakashi stated, voice calm, but sorrowful. "I failed him as a teacher. I couldn't give him the power he wanted, and I let him go down that path of revenge. I spent my time teaching him. I taught him the Chidori, all the while ignoring you Naruto, and you Sakura. I saw too much of myself in him, and wanted to guide him away from the direction he was going. But I couldn't. For that, I'm sorry." With that, Kakashi flickered out of the room, leaving behind a guilt-stricken Naruto and an apologetic Sakura. "It wasn't his fault," said Naruto, shaking his head. He wasn't speaking to Sakura, merely stating his thoughts as if Kakashi was still in the room to hear them. Hesitantly, Sakura put her hand on his arm and tugged lightly. He looked towards her, not quite focusing on her. He was still a little bit lost in his own thoughts. "Hey, it's all right Naruto." She spoke with caution, treading lightly. "He knows it's not his fault. But it's not yours either. We're all blaming ourselves, but in the end." Sakura looked down at her feet. She didn't know how Naruto would react to her next statement. She looked up to meet his eyes. The blue orbs were expectant, yet distant. In the end, the fault was Sasuke's own. She took in a shaky breath. She waited for him to explode, start yelling, or break down and cry. Instead, he simply smiled. Yeah, I guess you're right, Sakura. The blonde had composed himself, hidden his sadness behind a facade of cheer. It's been a while since I've been in the village, huh? Sakura smiled. She pushed her thoughts aside as the two walked out of the Hokage's office, looking almost content. Are you kidding me, Naruto? It's been 4 years, she joked, rolling her eyes. Naruto grinned, giving a small wave to Kotetsu and Izumo as they walked past the pair. Kotetsu blinked in surprise, and Izumo rubbed his eyes like he was seeing things. Sakura, amused, realized they must not have known Naruto was back. Sakura and Naruto walked amicably, keeping up a pleasant, if slightly generic conversation. As they walked, people would stop and look at the blonde, not quite sure whether they were seeing who they thought they were seeing. It really had been a long time, and Naruto had of course ditched the orange jumpsuit that made him so conspicuous. They walked without a direction. The two stopped when they found themselves at where it had all begun. Hee, guess we subconsciously led ourselves here, Sakura, said Naruto, happy to see the old place. Looks like you're right, Sakura smiled. The third training ground. She hadn't been here since doing the belt test the last time Naruto had returned to the village. Naruto grinned, getting an idea. Hey Sakura, let's go do the belt test. For old time's sake? Naruto, hate to burst your bubble, but we need Kakashi-sensei for that. The blonde dropped his grin. Sakura grimaced. Damn it, she shouldn't have mentioned Kakashi. Naruto smiled, more weakly this time. Oh, right, we could just take a look then? Sakura agreed, and the two shinobi walked in. The 8 shinobi gathered around Ino waited anxiously for a reaction. Ino noticed them all staring, and immediately relaxed her face. Oh, she said in an offhand tone. I didn't realize that he wasn't here yet. The other 8 let out a collective sigh of relief. The fact that Choji had mentioned Shikamaru, and Ino hadn't done anything, was a good sign. Ino sat down next to Choji. She couldn't believe her own boyfriend had mentioned that bastard. She prayed that Nara wouldn't show up. At that moment, Shikamaru arrived. Unfortunately, the only gap in the circle the shinobi had made was in between Ino and Hinata. Seeing the problem, Hinata shifted to her left, as did Kiba, Shino and Sai, creating a gap next to Lee. Shikamaru sat down silently. The tension within the group rose tenfold. The atmosphere grew icy. Finally, Ino spoke. Now that we're all finally here, I have something really important to tell you guys. How troublesome. I was in the middle of something, said Shikamaru under his breath. Ino's head snapped towards him. What's that, Nara? You think this isn't important enough to take some of your precious time? She said in a sickly sweet tone, glaring at him. Shikamaru sighed and shook his head. I'm glad to see you've left that Suna slut at home today, she mentioned, in a spiteful tone. Choji put his hand on her shoulder in an attempt to placate her. Maybe it hadn't been a good idea to tell Shikamaru about this meeting. But then again, Ino had said all of their friends. Tamari is on a mission today. She is not a slut, drawled Shikamaru. Troublesome. He really did not feel like arguing with his ex-girlfriend. How long would Ino hold a grudge? Whatever. Ino huffed. Anyway, what I have to tell you is, well, kind of really quite important. Just get to the point already. You've said that like 5 times, exclaimed Kiba. Hinata shushed him. Well? Ino froze up. She really didn't want to be the one to tell them. Maybe she should just wait for it to be officially announced? No, they deserved to know he was back. Well, you see, the reason I called you here today is... Ino's eyes widened and her mouth dropped into an oh. It looked like she wouldn't have to spread the news after all. Walking right towards us. 9 pairs of eyes swiveled towards the direction Ino was looking, only to see Sakura and Naruto? Naruto had seen them, just before they saw him. All 10 of his best friends, sitting in the grass in his old favorite training ground. Restraining himself, he walked slowly towards them, Sakura lagging slightly behind. It was about time he saw all his friends again. He just didn't think they'd all be conveniently in the same place at once. The group continued to stare at him, not saying a word, not moving an inch. Could it really be? Konoha's number 1, hyperactive, knucklehead ninja was back? Lee was the first to react. Immediately, he jumped up and sprinted towards Naruto. Skidding to a stop in front of him, he beamed. Naruto Uzumaki, You have returned. You have been gone a long time, but it is good to see you back. Lee posed in the trademark, nice guy, pose. The sun reflected off his flawless white teeth, almost blinding Naruto. I trust that you have used your years most effectively, and grown much stronger through training. You are certainly looking most healthy and youthful. Naruto grinned. Lee hadn't changed a bit, from his thick fuzzy eyebrows to his green spandex suit. Lee, it's good to see you too. Naruto, we must spar together soon. I have grown much in ability, and I will beat you. Lee dragged a laughing Naruto back towards the group, who waited, still and anticipating. During Lee and Naruto's small encounter, Sakura had made her way quickly to the group, and settled herself between Ino and Hinata. She looked at the blonde girl, who had a curious expression on her face. Oh my gosh, so he really is back. Sakura nodded. Ino squinted a little. He looks different, don't you think? There's something weird about him. But like, a good kind of weird. Sakura agreed, but she had a feeling what Ino had noticed would not be what she herself had. What do you mean? She asked the blonde girl. Is it just me, or is he much better looking than before? It's amazing what 4 years does to a person. Sakura rolled her eyes. Of course. Typical Ino. Really, Ino? That's what's different. Ino shrugged. What? I noticed other things too. For one thing, he ditched the orange, which is definitely a good thing in my book. He's taller, tanner and just all-round wire. It helps that he's got this kind of vibe now, like he's hiding something. It's mysterious, like how Sass. Ino stopped herself, and looked at Sakura with wide eyes. Sakura ignored her. Ino was more perceptive than Sakura had thought. She was right. Naruto was hiding something. Sakura had felt something strange ever since the meeting in the Hokage's office. She had brushed it off though, not really wanting to think about it. But Ino's words had confirmed her suspicions. Naruto was keeping something to himself. Her train of thought was broken when Lee and Naruto arrived. The green ninja had the formerly orange ninja by the arm, and in his enthusiasm, had physically dragged Naruto back towards the group of waiting shinobi. After depositing Naruto on the outside of the circle, he had noticed Sakura. Sakura, I cannot believe I did not notice you had arrived sooner. My awareness of your beauty was hindered. Can you ever forgive me? Sakura sighed and gave him a weak smile. Yeah, surely. Naruto stood awkwardly. He could feel the eyes of his peers burn into him, evaluating him. No one had made a move towards him yet. Choji was the first to stand up and step forward. The kind young man enveloped Naruto in a quick hug. Naruto, you're back, he exclaimed loudly, with a huge grin on his face. Naruto relaxed. Yeah, I guess I am. Slowly, the other members of the group sprang to action. Standing up, they approached Naruto, the more enthusiastic ones moving faster. He was surrounded with Choji, Ino, Tenten, Kiba, Lee and surprisingly, Sai at the front of the pack. The others hung back. It wasn't really in their natures to go charging towards him. Naruto was bombarded with a chorus of greetings. How've you been, buddy? Eating right? Naruto. Wow, you look good. It has certainly been a long time since we have seen you. Hey, the knucklehead's back. You are looking quite youthful, my friend. Naruto. Troublesome, I was really comfortable sitting down there in the grass, Naruto. Looks like everyone's happy to see you, Naruto. Naruto, you're back in time for the wedding. Naruto looked at Tenten, who was wearing a huge smile. Wedding? He asked, looking to her left hand. On it sparkled a diamond ring. Tenten turned around, and grabbed Neji's hand, which wore a matching gold band. She pulled him forward. We're getting married. Neji rolled his eyes casually at his excited fiancé. It's good to see you, Naruto. I trust you'll come to the wedding? Wow, of course. Congratulations, guys. I didn't even know you two were dating. A lot of things have changed since you left, Naruto Uzumaki. Heads turned towards the quiet shinobi who had spoken. Shino's words changed the mood of the group. It turned a little more somber. Naruto felt guilt wash over him, staining his happiness. Shino, the bug nin smiled a small side. It is nice to see you remembered who I was this time around. Naruto laughed, and the mood lifted again. Everyone was all smiles. Guys, we're standing in the middle of a training ground. Let's go get some ramen. On me. Kiba groaned. Typical Naruto. How about you try something other than ramen for a change? Naruto looked offended. Geez, Kiba. Fine, you pick a place. Kiba turned to Hinata, who was standing right at the back of the group. Hinata, what was the name of that place we went to last Saturday? Natsuki's? Choji brightened up. Oh, that's one of ours. I'll tell Dad to save us a table. Wait, so we aren't going to go eat now? The attention was back on Naruto. Awkwardly, Sakura spoke up. Naruto? You're kind of messy right now. Naruto looked down at his clothes. They were covered in dust and grime from having been traveled in for 2 days straight. He remembered that he hadn't had a chance to clean up since returning to the village. He must have looked like quite the sight. Sheepishly, he grinned and rubbed the back of his neck. Right, forgot about that. So dinner at Natsuki's tonight then? I'll tell Dad 7 p.m. Is that okay? This was met with approval. So it's settled. Everyone meet outside Natsuki's at 7 p.m. tonight, said Sakura. There was a flurry of nods and agreements from the gathered shinobi. Okay then, well I should probably go and get cleaned up. Choji's dad won't like it if I stink up his restaurant. With a smile and a wave, Naruto walked away. The group of shinobi slowly started to split off until only Choji, Ino and Sakura were left. I'm going to head off to talk to Dad now. I'll see you later, said Choji. Ino kissed him quickly on the cheek before he left. Ino looked at Sakura, and the two girls started walking back into the streets of Konoha. So, what are you going to do now? Asked Ino. What do you mean? Replied Sakura. You know perfectly well what I mean, stated Ino. Sakura sighed. She didn't know exactly what Ino meant. Now that Naruto's back, how do you feel? I don't know, Ino. I don't know what I feel, and I have no idea what to do. I need some time to just sort everything out, you know? Ino nodded in understanding. So what did you think? Asked Tenten. Neji frowned. He looked different. He stated simply, really Neji? Care to elaborate? There are the physical changes of course, but most striking are his eyes. They used to be full of this determination. Now they are empty of emotion or just unreadable, even to me. Tenten agreed. You're right. Do you think it has anything to do with why he's back? Probably. The couple turned and entered the Yamanaka flower shop. Tenten, we should not pry. Naruto will tell us in his own time the reason for his return. I guess so. We should just leave it for now. Quote, the two were greeted by Inoichi Yamanaka. Here to choose floral arrangements? He guessed, smiling at the young couple. Of course, chirped Tenten. Letting go of Neji's arm, she threw herself into a conversation about flowers. I was thinking of using blue and white as the color scheme. I don't really want to use pink, but roses would be nice. Yes, I see. What about some dark blue delphinium around white roses? I'm not sure. Can I see it? Of course. Come this way please. Inoichi led Tenten through a door behind the counter. Neji sighed. He had a feeling he would be here for a while. Shikamaru arrived at his apartment to find the door unlocked. Drawing out a kunai, he entered cautiously, only to find Tamari sitting on the couch, reading over a report, pen in hand. She looked up when he entered and put the report down. You're back, he commented. I didn't think you'd be back so soon. It was a false alarm. Turns out that enemy ninja, seen by the civilians, were actually training dummies, said Tamari simply. She glanced at the weapon in his hand. Noticing her gaze, he put the kunai away quickly. Where have you been? She asked with a smirk. Ino called everyone together for a meeting, he said, sitting down on the couch next to her. Ino, said Tamari, raising her eyebrows. Don't worry. This time, she didn't try to kill me, he replied. Still, said Tamari apprehensively. It was about Naruto. He's back in Konoha. Tamari looked shocked. Naruto? As in, Uzumaki? Shikamaru nodded. But he hasn't been seen for 4 years. Why's he back now? Shikamaru shrugged. He didn't say, but I have a theory. I see. I should write to Gaara immediately. He'll definitely want to hear about this. Good idea. By the way, we're going to dinner tonight. Tamari looked at Shikamaru strangely. We are? Troublesome, I know. Natsuki's at 7 o'clock. Naruto's treat. I suppose that means it won't just be you and me? And Ino will be there, won't she? Are you sure I should go? Shikamaru sighed and nodded his head. Choji should be able to control her. Besides, Ino wouldn't want to make a scene in public. Hasn't stopped her from doing it before. Just come, alright? Tamari smiled and kissed Shikamaru quickly. Of course I'll be there. But if she's rude to me, well, don't blame me if Blondie ends up in hospital with a fan shoved down her throat. Troublesome woman, said Shikamaru with a smile. That's why you love me. Tamari leaned over and kissed him quickly. Now leave me alone. I've got to finish this report for the Hokage. Sai and Shino walked in an amicable silence until Sai spoke. It was quite nice to see Naruto again. The bug nin agreed. Yes, I am not too sure, but did Naruto seem a little different to you? Asked Sai. He did. Something has changed him. Sai nodded. His instincts had been correct. Naruto Uzumaki. The name had haunted her for 4 years. No matter how hard she pushed it to the back of her mind, no matter how hard she tried to forget, it remained there, a faint presence in every thought. She didn't like to admit it, but it was there. Hinata looked at Kiba, who was chatting away, oblivious to the fact that Hinata's mind was elsewhere. Brave, kind, cheerful Kiba. He had been the one to rescue her. Save her from the depths of her self-pity. Why couldn't she just move on? The year after Naruto had left, Hinata had shut herself down. Naruto had left before, but it had been different. That first time, she had watched him go, with the knowledge that he would be back. So she only had to wait and hope. But 4 years ago, Naruto had disappeared without a goodbye. For a week or so, many people thought he had become a missing nin. The 5th Hokage had had to officially announce Naruto's long-term leave before those rumors died down. When Hinata had heard, she had been devastated. But quickly, that had turned into anger. Now normally, Hinata was a very calm, forgiving, placid girl. But something in her snapped. How dare he leave? She had loved him in secret for years. Finally, she builds up the courage to tell him, while simultaneously attempting to save his life. And does he appreciate it? No. She'd almost died for him, and he hadn't said a word to her afterwards. He hadn't even said goodbye before abandoning the village. Yes, Hinata had gotten very, very angry. But after the anger, came guilt. She felt horrible for getting mad at him. Surely, he simply hadn't meant to hurt her? When he thought she had died, he had gone into an almost unstoppable rage. Maybe that meant he did care? Hinata had tortured herself with those thoughts for weeks. This had led to a small breakdown of sorts. It wasn't a dramatic breakdown. There was no crying, or screaming, or acting crazy. There is just a blankness about her being. She became quiet, quieter than usual, almost never speaking. She stopped training as hard, preferring to sit and stare into space. Everyone became quite worried about her. Neji, Kurenai, Shino and Hanabi all tried to break her out of that state of nothing, but they couldn't. It seemed like no one could. But Kiba did. He had calmly dragged her outside, not making any attempt to coddle her. He simply acted the way he normally did. And for the first time in a year, Hinata had felt something other than pain. Slowly, she returned to normal. In fact, she became better than she had been before. Everyone noticed the change in her, and accredited it to Kiba. She'd grown to love Kiba. He was the brightest thing in her life. But deep down, she hadn't forgotten Naruto. But did she still love him? So now what? Hinata asked herself as her and Kiba approached the Hyuga estate. She really looked at Kiba. He was laughing at some joke he'd made. She smiled. Kiba didn't deserve to be ignored. She could sort out her feelings later. She laughed along with him, consciously pushing all thoughts of a certain blonde shinobi away. At that moment, Hinata only knew one thing for certain about how she felt. She was really dreading dinner that night. The trip back to his old apartment was uneventful, so Naruto found himself thinking about his friends. One friend, in particular. Sakura. It seemed like Sakura was the same as ever. Naruto had never been the most observant person. He knew that his leaving had hurt her, and he was sorry about it. Hopefully though, it hadn't impacted her too much. Sakura was tough. She'd probably moved on from what little feelings she may have had for him. It may have been the fact that he hadn't seen her in 4 years, but Sakura sure was prettier now. She carried herself more maturely. It had been a while. Sakura probably had a boyfriend now. One that wouldn't leave her for the world. She deserved that much. When Naruto arrived at his familiar old home, he opened the door to see that the place had been cleaned up. It seemed that Granny Tsunade must have sent someone in to dispose of all the expired food and rubbish. Luckily, the 5th Hokage had seen fit to keep the apartment exclusively for Naruto's use. It had stood empty all the years he was away. Other than the slightly unnatural tidiness and general emptiness, the place was exactly the same. His old poster of the Konoha symbol still hung above his bed, a little faded, and rolling up slightly at the edges. He remembered sitting under it, on his bed just before the funeral of the 3rd Hokage. After that, every morning when he had woken up, he had sworn to protect the village and continue the will of fire. Whenever something terrible had happened or nothing seemed to be going right, he had sat and looked up at that poster. It reminded him of his dream to become Hokage. It inspired him to never give up, to keep hoping. The will of fire. The first, second and third Hokages had all possessed it, and therefore were able to give their lives for Konoha. His very own father, the fourth Hokage, had it also. Granny Tsunade, the fifth Hokage, was carrying on her predecessor's spirit. When Naruto saw that poster, he saw the Hokage's legacy. It stood for everything he admired and wanted to be. But he had left the village to do what he felt was right. He had a gut feeling that many people had considered that a betrayal of sorts, leaving to chase after a lost cause, instead of staying and training to become Konoha's next leader. Could he ever be accepted again? Would he have to give up his dream of becoming the next Hokage? He wandered around the small room, running his fingers over the familiar walls. It was an oddly sentimental action, not something that you would expect him to do. For 16 years of his life, this apartment had been his home. Returning to it gave him this warm feeling, deep inside his chest. He headed into the bathroom, towards the inviting shower. He desperately needed to clean himself off. Naruto swore he had grime in places he'd never even known he'd had. Hopefully no one had turned off the water. Or the electricity. Otherwise he was in for a really bad shower. Natsuki's was a classy place. The Akamichi clan had been lucky to buy the restaurant when its previous owners had left following the Fourth Shinobi War. So it made perfect sense that Choji was having a hard time convincing his dad to let him have an entire table reserved for him and his friends. "Choji, you cannot have a table. It's too short notice. Besides, we're almost completely booked." Now, Choji may have been a powerful, 20-year-old, Junin-level shinobi, but he was still rather good at whining to his parents. "But Dad, I already told everyone I could get us in." Choza Akamichi sighed. "Why exactly do you want a table anyway? I'm sure it's not just so you can sit and chat." Choji looked sheepish. "Actually Dad, it kind of is." Choji saw the look on his dad's face, and hurried to continue. "You see the thing is, well, you know Naruto?" Choza nodded. Who didn't know the former Hokage candidate who had left Konoha? Well, he's kind of back. Choza's eyebrows shot upwards. The Uzumaki kid had returned. This changed everything. "You know what, Choji, I think a table might have opened up after all." His son grinned. "Thanks Dad." He turned to leave, and then quickly spun round again. "Oh, almost forgot. We've arranged to meet at 7 o'clock. I'll have the table, Choji. I promise." Choza watched his son leave with a spring in his step, and prepared to leave as well. Inoichi and Shikaku needed to hear about Naruto's return. It was starting to wear off. He could now move all the fingers on his right hand. It wasn't a lot, but it was a start. Soon, he just had to bide his time. It was nearing the time. 13 young ninja were getting ready for a night at one of Konoha's most exclusive restaurants. The evening was sure to be interesting, to say the least. The venue was set. No one had doubted Choji's ability to get a table at Natsuki's. There was no way Choza would turn down the chance to have Naruto's official reunion dinner at his restaurant. The sheer amount of publicity that would come from it was huge. People talked, and soon enough, everyone would be clamoring to get a seat at Natsuki's, in hope of seeing the famous blonde for themselves. It also helped that Natsuki's was a rather expensive restaurant, and Naruto was known to be quite the eater. The aforementioned blonde had taken a rather long shower, and managed to get off 2 days' worth of dust and grime. Luckily, the water had been hot. Naruto stepped out of the shower in a cloud of steam. It felt good to actually be having a proper clean. He shook the water out of his hair, and wrapped a towel around his waist. He walked out of the bathroom and went in search of clothing. Opening his wardrobe door, he was met with a sorry sight. 2 sets of his old black and orange tracksuit hung there, along with something in a dry cleaner's bag. Damn it, thought Naruto. He'd forgotten that when he'd left the village, he'd sealed most of his clothing into a scroll and taken it with him. Most of the clothes he'd taken with him had been destroyed in various fights, or worn out from general wear and tear. Naruto pulled out one of the tracksuits. Despite having lain unworn for 4 years, it still retained its cheery bright orange color. He held the tracksuit against himself, jacket shoulders to his shoulders. It was too short, it seemed he'd definitely outgrown his old garments. He hung the tracksuit back on the rack and pulled out the other one. It was also, as expected, much too short. Hanging it back up, he took out the item of clothing in the bag. He could not for the life of him remember what was in there. Hoping for some article of clothing which could be worn to a classy restaurant, Naruto unzipped the bag and carefully took out the garment inside. Handling it carefully, he held it up. His eyes widened. After an awkward period where the two had just walked in silence, Ino managed to drag Sakura out shopping. Sakura had tried protesting, but Ino hadn't listened. It's Natsuki's, Sakura. It's not a ramen stand, where you can show up in your medic uniform. You need something nice. Sakura gave up trying to make Ino let her go. It would just be easier to go along with it. Ino dragged her into store after store, and both girls tried on outfit after outfit, Ino with much enthusiasm, and Sakura not so much. Ino quickly found something she liked, but Sakura did not possess that luck. Sakura felt like she'd tried on hundreds of different dresses, skirts, tops and jackets, but nothing got Ino's stamp of approval. I swear Ino, this is the last store, said a rather exasperated Sakura as Ino dragged her into yet another boutique. Yeah, Sakura. Look, I know you'll definitely find something in here. Ino waved the remark off and made a beeline towards a rack of dresses. Picking out several, she threw them into Sakura's arms and all but pushed her into a changing room. Sakura looked exhaustedly at the 5 dresses Ino had given her. After immediately eliminating 2 for being a bit too revealing, Sakura was left with 3. The first was a simple black dress that looked promising. Unfortunately, it proved quite a struggle to get into, being 2 sizes too small. Feeling rather like an overstuffed pillow, Sakura stuck her head out of the changing room curtain. Ino? She asked the girl, who was absent-mindedly admiring a pink scarf. Ino turned around. Sakura, get out of the changing room, she exclaimed, hands on hips. How am I supposed to see what you look like if you don't come out? Well, how am I supposed to wear this thing when it's way too small? Replied Sakura, still refusing to leave the changing room. Well, Rry, huffed Ino. It was the only one left. Just try one of the other ones on. Sakura sighed. She was going to be there all day, wasn't she? At this rate, they'd never make it out of this store, let alone to Natsuki's. The next dress was treated to a long list of Ino's criticisms. Too long. The neckline's off. That shade of pink clashes with your hair and washes you out at the same time. Plus, it's super childish and makes you look like 12 years old. Sakura agreed with Ino's remarks on the hot pink baby doll dress. Heading back into the changing room, she desperately hoped that this lad dress would be the one. Otherwise she is going to show up to Natsuki's in her spare medic uniform. Perfect, squealed Ino when Sakura stepped out. Buy it. The blue dress was simple, yet elegant. It fit Sakura like it was made for her. The shade of dark, slate blue worked well with Sakura's rather bright hair. It was made of a light silky material with spaghetti straps, just perfect for a hot summer night. Sakura liked it. Unlike some of the other things she had tried on, this one just felt right. It felt good to be buying something nice. She hadn't really gone shopping in a while. She'd really just not had the time, what with working in the hospital for most of her days. Wow, she'd really let her social life fall apart, hadn't she? Sakura? Hello, Sakura? Are you buying the dress? Sakura shook her head slightly. Ino was waving her hand in front of her face, trying to attract Sakura's attention. Sorry, I must have just zoned out there. Apologized Sakura. Yes, I'm going to buy the dress. Ino grinned. Sakura changed out of the dress and headed to the counter to pay for it. On their way out, they noticed Hinata and Tenten walking past, with Neji and Kiba following behind them, both carrying large loads of flowers. Hey guys, what's up with the flowers? Called Ino, waving. The 4 stopped, and waited for Ino and Sakura to catch up to them. Hi Sakura. Hi Ino, chirped Tenten. The flowers? They're just samples of flower arrangements for the wedding. Neji and I were just at your shop Ino. Your dad was so helpful. Wait a second, it makes sense that Neji was there. But why are Hinata and Kiba with you? Asked Sakura. Hinata smiled at Kiba, who was scowling under a pile of blue, white and purple flowers. I dragged Kiba along with me to this. He didn't really know what he was getting into when he agreed to help me. He was supposed to just walk me home. He's probably regretting it now. The girls laughed as the group walked out of the main shopping streets. They made small talk, avoiding any topics that may come up at the night's dinner. Finally they reached the Hyuga estate, and said goodbye to Neji, Tenten and Hinata. "See you guys at dinner," called Ino, as she, Sakura and Kiba walked off. "Sue," said Kiba, feeling just a little bit awkward. "Naruto's back." He paused, waiting for a reaction from Sakura. In return, he only got a simple, "yes." "And?" he asked, pushing for more. He'd avoided bringing the topic up before, not really wanting to mention him around Hinata. Maybe now he could talk to someone about Naruto's return. Instead, all he got was Ino grabbing onto a tense Sakura's arm. "And we'll see you at dinner," she said, before she and Sakura turned and left him walking alone. "Great," he said to nobody, walking home to get ready. 6:50 p.m. The first ninja to arrive outside Natsuki's was Choji, of course. He had arrived early to confirm that he and his friends had indeed managed to secure a table. The table was ready and waiting. Inside the restaurant, it was crowded with even more people than usual, which was saying a lot, considering that Natsuki's was usually fully booked. Choji noticed that near the entrance of the restaurant, sat Sakushi Niseno and a camera. Both were trying to appear subtle, and succeeding, as long as the person that saw them was not a ninja. Sakushi was the gossip columnist from the Konoha Letter, Konoha's very own tabloid newspaper. It had started up just after the Fourth Shinobi War. The tabloid was popular with a lot of the civilians, and because of it, many ninjas had become rather famous. Firstmost among them was the Konoha 12, the Konoha 11 plus Psi. Media coverage about what the letter dubbed Konoha's next generation of Y Shinobi had intensified just after Naruto's departure, and then dropped off again, with only a weekly column to inform the civilians of their weekly lives. Recently, because of Neji and Tenten's engagement, coverage had picked up again. The staff at the Konoha Letter were all ex-shinobi, some from Konoha, and some from other villages. The reason for this was so other ninja did not notice their presence straight away while they took paparazzi shots of their daily lives. Choji had a sneaking suspicion that his dad may have leaked the fact that Naruto would be dining there tonight. His dad was smart. He knew that everyone would be clamoring to catch a glimpse of the returning shinobi, especially reporters. A front-page article showing the Konoha 12 eating at Natsuki's after Naruto's return to Konoha would generate a flurry of interest in the restaurant. He sat down at the large table their group had been assigned. Natsuki's maitre d', his uncle Daiku, had happily pointed it out to him. "No need to show me to my seat, Uncle Daiku," he said, grinning widely. Daiku smiled. "Of course, Choji. By the way, you certainly look good tonight." Choji looked down at his clean, button-up white shirt and brown chinos. Being an Akamichi, he knew that he couldn't walk into a fancy restaurant wearing his casual everyday clothing. But he wasn't much of a snappy dresser, so had opted for something simple. "Thanks, Uncle Daiku," he replied happily before heading to, and sitting down at their table. Choji caught sight of Ino and Sakura arriving, Daiku leading them over. He stood up, waving them over enthusiastically. Other diners turned around to look at him, some slightly scandalized, others excited to see one of Naruto's friends. Choji stopped waving, and waited. He was a bit surprised to Sakura dressed in something other than her medic uniform. Honestly, he hadn't seen her wear anything different from that for a really long time. The blue dress she was wearing was really nice. Pulling a chair out for her, he greeted her. "Hey Sakura, you look great." Sakura smiled and sat down. "Thanks Choji. So do you." He greeted Ino with a hug. She kissed him lightly on the cheek, and sat down on the offered chair. "Ino, you look really, wow. Is that a new dress?" She really did, in his opinion at least. For once, her blonde hair was out. It hung down her back, swishing with every step she took. Her dress was a dark purple, almost black, being only a shade or two different than the small black clutch purse she carried. Cocktail length, it was elegant and strapless. In his eyes, she looked perfect. Moments like this reminded Choji of how lucky he was to have Ino. Ino blushed and beckoned for him to sit down next to her. "Thank you Choji." "Yes it is." Ino looked around, and noticed the empty seats. "Where's everyone?" she asked. "We're early Ino," said Sakura, placing her blue beaded purse onto the table. "I told you we left too soon Sakura. Seriously, I'd barely put my mascara on." Ino sighed. Choji put his hand on her arm, and she smiled at him. "It's fine Ino. You're gorgeous." Hey, look, here's Neji and Tenten. The two girls turned to see an elegant couple walking towards them, being led by Daiku. Tenten's for once was not in her customary two buns, but rather a sleek French twist. She had teamed this with a mint green halter neck dress and rather high-heeled shoes. Neji looked very sophisticated, dressed in a gray suit. His tie matched Tenten's dress perfectly. The couple sat down, Neji pulling Tenten's chair out for her. They were greeted with smiles and exclamations. "You two look really great together," said Sakura. Ino agreed, and then proceeded to ask whether Neji had dressed himself. "Of course I did," exclaimed Neji, before quickly changing the subject. He turned and started talking to Choji about the night's specials. Tenten rolled her eyes and grinned at Ino, while subtly shaking her head no. Ino giggled quietly, before noticing Kiba and Hinata walk towards their table, barely a minute after Neji and Tenten. The shy girl was wearing a black, one-shouldered, knee-length dress. Her blue-black hair was half up, half down. She looked slightly uncomfortable, but classy nonetheless. Kiba had ditched the leather jacket he normally wore, in favor of black sports jacket, paired with charcoal dress pants. After pulling out Hinata's chair for her, Kiba sat down. "Hey guys, where the hell is everyone?" he asked rather loudly. Other diners turned to look at him. Hinata shushed him and quietly apologized. "Don't apologize for him, Hinata," Ino said, while shooting her best glare at Kiba. She turned to Hinata with a smile. "By the way, you look so amazing. You even managed to make Kiba look less feral than usual." Ino's words were met with laughter and agreement from the rest of the group. "Hey," said Kiba jokingly. "I feel offended." Hinata relaxed a little. She didn't normally dress up very much, but luckily she'd had Tenten to help her find something to wear. She looked around, noticing that not everyone was there yet. She felt a little relieved. She laughed and thanked Ino while simultaneously patting Kiba on the hand. Playfully, he grabbed her hand and kissed it, before grinning at her. "You look awesome, Hinata," Kiba said. "Ah," exclaimed Tenten. She happily watched at her future cousin-in-law, who was blushing a little. "You guys are just adorable." "We try," said Kiba. "Hey Neji, how's the wedding planning going?" Conversation turned to talk of the upcoming nuptials. They were interrupted by the arrival of Sai, Shino and Lee, at exactly 7 p.m. Shino was covered up, as usual. He'd chosen to wear an outfit almost identical to his normal one. Only his coat was light gray and made of a much nicer fabric, with a collar that didn't obscure his face. Sai had opted for a rather long black cloak, over dark blue trousers and a dark blue top. It was nice to see he'd tried to dress up. Lee, on the other hand, was wearing his regular green jumpsuit. "Good evening, my friends. You are all looking most youthful and marvelous," said Lee cheerfully as the three sat down. Lee zoomed straight for the empty seat next to Sakura. Shino greeted everyone with a nod, and sat down next to Kiba silently. "Hello," said Sai. "You are all dressed rather formally. I have attempted to as well." Sakura smiled kindly at Sai. He'd made an effort. It was more than could be said for Lee. "Lee," exclaimed Tenten, "what are you wearing?" "My most magnificent jumpsuit or course, Tenten." "Neji, my teammate, I am most happy to see that you and Tenten have also worn green tonight," said Lee, blatantly ignorant of the fact that he was the only one wearing his usual clothing. "Lee, you do realize we're at Natsuki's, right?" asked Tenten, shooting a look towards her fiancé. Lee looked confused. "Yes, Tenten. Is that not where we are supposed to be?" Tenten sighed. "We're at Natsuki's and you wore your jumpsuit." Lee became even more confused. "What is the problem, Tenten? Am I dressed incorrectly?" "Now, that is not possible, for there is no occasion where I cannot wear Guy-sensei's most amazing inventions." Tenten turned to Neji, eyebrows raised. "Didn't you tell him this was a fancy restaurant? I thought you were going to tell him," protested Neji. Lee was absolutely baffled by his teammate's argument. Quietly, Sakura explained to him that he was supposed to wear formal clothing. "Oh," he exclaimed loudly, interrupting Tenten and Neji. "See, I was supposed to get dressed up?" Tenten and Neji nodded, glad to see that Lee understood. "Well then you will be glad to know that I am," said Lee, striking a seated, nice guy, pose. "For this is my favorite jumpsuit. It is the most magnificent and youthful of them all. Guy-sensei himself declared that this jumpsuit is the pure embodiment of the power of youth. It is the one I have myself embroidered with the Konoha symbol." Lee stood and turned around to show that Konoha's stylized leaf was indeed stitched in bright red thread right over Lee's bottom. He proudly displayed it, making sure to point with both hands. Reactions at the table varied from silent laughter to slight traumatization. Quickly, Sakura pulled him back onto his seat before any other diners noticed. "No, Lee, just no," she hissed quietly. "What is wrong, my beautiful lotus blossom?" asked Lee, concerned. "Do you not like my jumpsuit?" Tenten coughed, deciding it would be best to drop the subject of dress code before anything happened. "Sue, who's still missing?" she asked quickly, steering the conversation away from Lee's backside. "Well, now that we're here, it's just Naruto," drawled a voice. Heads snapped around to see Shikamaru, dressed in a tan suit, with Temari right behind him. They had arrived while everyone was distracted by Lee. Awkwardly, Temari had shown up in the same dress as Ino, only in red. The atmosphere got tense. "So, you're late," said Ino, glaring at Shikamaru, while avoiding looking at Temari altogether. "Yep," he replied calmly, "we got a bit held up." "You brought Temari," Ino stated. Shikamaru nodded. The table fell silent. It seemed like the whole restaurant was hushed. That is, until someone cried out, "Oh my gosh, is that him?" Suddenly, the attention of all the restaurant's patrons turned towards the door. A figure was being led in by Daiku. He was being met with excited whispers, and open staring from the diners. The silence at the ninja's table was broken by a gasp from Hinata. "Oh gosh," Kiba blinked. "Is that?" he asked, uncertain. "The fourth," she said, voice trailing off. "He looks just like him," Ino said quietly. Tenten nodded in agreement. "He was wearing that," said Shikamaru. "During the invasion of pain." Choji finished his sentence for him. Everyone but Temari winced. That had not been a pleasant memory. Many had faced death that day. Some had even died, like Kakashi and Shizune. Luckily, Naruto had saved them in the end, and convinced Nagato to bring all those who had died back to life. Naruto arrived at the table, and didn't sit down. No one stood to greet him. The busy restaurant had silenced itself, save for the faint click of a camera shutter. Everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. At that moment, Naruto was the spitting image of his father. He carried himself with an air of dignity, yet at the same time seemed shrouded in mystery. He was wearing a long, dark red coat that seemed to billow around him. The coat had a familiar flame pattern around the hem. It was the coat that Naruto had worn when he arrived back in Konoha after completing his sage training. The coat combined Minato Namikaze's Yondaime cloak, with the Sannin Jiraiya's colors. It was a coat worthy of the Hokage. Many were spellbound. Everyone could see what the coat meant, what it represented. They saw the power emanating from it, the spirit of their beloved Yondaime and his sensei, Jiraiya. Two of Konoha's most powerful ninjas, both cut down in battle. Their legacy was living on in the blonde-haired boy. None of them, save Hinata, had really seen the coat properly. Sakura, Shikamaru and Choji had seen it from afar, and the others hadn't seen it before at all. Only Hinata knew that the coat Naruto was wearing was most definitely not the same one he had worn 4 years ago. That one had been destroyed when Naruto had exploded into his six-tailed form during his battle with Pain. The new coat, the spell Naruto's arrival had cast, was broken when Choji, ever the good host, stood up. "Naruto, you made it," he said with a shaky grin, going up to Naruto and patting him on the back. The table snapped back to life, as did the rest of the restaurant. While many civilians were still sneaking glances over at the young shinobi's table every now and then, most had returned to their meals. Choji sat back down. Ino squeezed his hand, thankful that he'd broken the ice. Naruto sat down on the free seat next to Sakura, who greeted him happily. Sai smiled at him. "Hello Naruto. You are late. I believe that is considered rude." Kiba flashed his fangs at Naruto in a playful grin. "Yeah Naruto. You're late. I mean, come on. Even I got here on time." Naruto grinned. Nice to see that everyone still acted normally. Ino blew a raspberry, and Naruto turned to see her rolling her eyes. "Police. Only because you had Hinata to drag you here. Honestly Kiba, what would you do without her?" His eyes went in search of her when he heard her name. Naruto couldn't remember actually seeing her earlier that day, but he swore he'd heard her quiet, stuttering voice. His gaze roamed round the table, scanning over the faces of his closest friend until he found her. Blue eyes locked with white for a fraction of a second, before she broke away, quickly turning her head towards her boyfriend. The moment was fleeting, over too quickly for most people to see. But they did. A pair of green eyes, and a pair of brown had caught the look. Police. Only because you had Hinata to drag you here. Honestly Kiba, what would you do without her? She had been dreading that moment. Hinata knew that eventually she'd be mentioned, but she had been hoping it would be later rather than sooner. As soon as Ino said her name, Hinata could feel his eyes moving. She didn't need the Byakugan to see where he was looking. She didn't meant to look towards him. It was instinct, built into her after years of watching him. Her head moved on its own accord, turning slightly to the left, towards him. Half a second, maximum. Their eyes met for only that small amount of time. But for her, it felt like eternity. His eyes. They were drawing her in, pulling her deeper into the dark blue. She was losing herself, losing control, and falling into the gaze. His eyes seemed to burrow into her soul. They were searching. Were they really searching for her? It took everything to tear herself away. Every fiber of her being rebelled. She was locked into the moment, but she didn't want to break free. She turned back to Kiba immediately, and gave a small smile. He was pouting at Ino's comment. Wait, what was going on with his eyes? They were narrowed? No. It must have been her imagination. He looked fine, still jolly and happy to be joking around. It took Hinata a second to realize that Naruto's attention was still on her. So, he said to Kiba, all the while keeping his focus on her face. You and Hinata? Yep, answered Kiba. This time, Hinata was sure she could sense negativity. 3 years now. Sensing hostility, Choji looked from the face to face. Kiba's fangs were ever so slightly bared. Naruto was completely calm, yet staring quite intently at Hinata. The girl was in turn, keeping her eyes on Kiba, refusing to look near Naruto. Hastily changing the subject in an attempt to return the table to normal, Choji cleared his throat. Heads turned to look at him. So guys, let's order, he said cheerfully, waving over a waiter. A man in a waiter's uniform came over, and gave them all menus. They accepted them gratefully, though the air was still tense. Sai could sense that something was wrong. His former teammate and the Inuzuka were in some sort of standoff. He opened his mouth to comment, and then looked to Shino, who shook his head slightly. Sai closed his mouth again, deciding instead to read his menu. The 13 shinobi read their menus in silence. They gave their orders quickly. Ino noted the awkwardness. When it came to her turn to order, she made a decision. Bring sake. Lots of sake, she said to the waiter, who nodded and left the table. When the waiter came back with their drinks, most of those at the table accepted quickly. Hopefully the alcohol would get people talking again. Only Lee refused even the smallest drink. Guy-sensei has told me all about the dangers of drinking, he spouted enthusiastically. I must remain youthful and pure. Everyone nodded in utmost agreement. They all knew that Lee, a natural master of the drunken fist style, couldn't drink even a drop of alcohol. When he did, well, he had a tendency to destroy everything in sight. Of course Lee, said Tenten sweetly. She took a drink from her full glass. So, Ino, she said to the blonde, who was glaring at the other blonde, female shinobi across the table. How's work in T&I? Ino shrugged. Same old, same old. We had a C-rank missing nin from a megacure in today. Nothing interesting. How's the academy? Pretty good. Kurenai brought little Kasumi in for a visit today. She desperately wants to be a ninja. Tenten smiled. She really did enjoy teaching at the academy. Suddenly, everyone started talking about this Kasumi person. Ah, she is just the sweetest little thing. Cooed Ino. How old is she now? 4? 5? Asked Kiba. She's almost 4, said Hinata. Only a month until her birthday. Kurenai-sensei asked me to help with the party. She also said to see if you wanted to as well. Of course I will, squealed Ino. Who's Kasumi? Asked Naruto. He hadn't heard the name before, and the conversation was leaving him confused. Kasumi Sarutobi, Kurenai and Asuma's child, answered Shino. Wait, Naruto looked incredibly perplexed. He glanced at Shikamaru quickly before continuing. But Asuma's dead? Shikamaru sighed. Yeah idiot, we know that. He drawled. Kurenai was pregnant when he died. Right, okay, got it, said Naruto sheepishly. He laughed awkwardly. Small talk was made as the group waited for their food. Well, at least, small talk was made between those who were actually talking to each other, or talking at all. Choji, Tenten and surprisingly enough, Shino led the conversation, with Sai, Kiba, Ino and Neji occasionally joining in, and Naruto interrupting with questions. When their food arrived, the shinobi dug in, thankful to have an excuse not to talk. Having been apprenticed to Tsunade for years, Sakura had learned a thing or two from the legendary Sannin. Some of these tips were helpful, like how to extract poison out of someone's body, or how to knit together deep wounds. Others were less useful, such as the ability to drink a lot. Sakura was feeling, well, she didn't know what she was feeling. At first, when dinner started, she'd been feeling kind of relaxed. It was nice to go out and wear a pretty dress. But then Naruto had shown up, and had some sort of a moment or something with Hinata. What the hell? No one else seemed to notice, so maybe she was imagining it. But no, there had been something. There had been a look. Sakura was 100% sure of it. She'd made the decision to start downing bottles of sake after Naruto and Kiba had had some sort of alpha dog face-off. How much had she had to drink? 6, 7 bottles of sake in the last hour or so? God, she was drunk. Good thing Tsunade had also taught her how to cure a hangover. They were halfway through eating when someone brought it up. The reason they were gathered there that evening. Naruto, said Neji politely. He looked expectantly at the blonde shinobi. Naruto looked up. From what he'd heard in the last 10 minutes, the conversation had been about the price of kunai and shuriken. Yeah, he said. When Neji had said his name, everyone at the table had looked up, even Sakura, who had been surprisingly silent all evening. I think it's about time you told us. Neji said simply. Naruto blinked. Damn it, he'd been hoping not to have to do that. He decided to play dumb. Tell you guys what? He asked. Neji sighed. Why you were back in Konoha? We deserve to know. Naruto bit the inside of his cheek and grimaced. Are you really sure you want to know? Nods all around. Fine, he said, defeated. I'll tell you. Everyone put down their utensils and waited for him to start. He took a deep breath. He'd already told the story once today. Sakura knows why I'm back. Shikamaru, Shino, maybe even you Ino, you may have guessed it. I left 4 years ago. But you guys know that. You also probably know why I left. To go after Sasuke, of course. He paused, checking the reactions of the group. I've always said that I'll never, ever give up. It's my ninja way. Hinata's heart skipped a beat at those words. She wasn't really sure whether that was good or bad. It was the same with finding Sasuke. I couldn't give up on him, even if all of you had. Shikamaru felt a little guilt set in. He'd been the one to approach Team 7 when they had decided Sasuke had to be killed. It took me a long time, but I found him. It was a few weeks ago now. Ino gasped. She raised a hand to her mouth. Wait, you mean? He's here? He's come back with you? Naruto shook his head sadly. No, he couldn't it. He didn't want to tell them. Why had it been so much easier telling Kakashi and Sakura alone? Why couldn't he say it now? Sasuke's dead. That bastard's finally dead. A voice slurred from Naruto's right. It was Sakura. She'd told them for him. Silence. What happened? It was Hinata who spoke up. Naruto looked at her in surprise, then shook himself mentally. He proceeded to tell his story, not looking at them. He couldn't. Naruto's story ended with a mix of reactions. No one knew what to say. Should they be sad that one of their own had gone? Happy that he'd finally been dealt with? No one spoke. Lee patted Naruto awkwardly on the back. Ino was holding Choji's hand, looking like she was fighting back tears. Choji was ashen-faced. Neji, Sai and Shino had their heads bowed down, as if in prayer. Neji's AR was around Tenten, hugging her close. Hinata had buried her face in Kiba's neck, and Kiba had a look of complete and utter shock on his face. Temari and Shikamaru did not look as affected as the rest of them. Shikamaru had figured it out quickly. He'd felt sadness, but no sense of surprise. Sasuke had once been his comrade, a fellow leaf shinobi. For that person, Shikamaru could grieve. But for the insane, remorseless murderer that Sasuke had become? Shikamaru felt only relief that that part of Sasuke had died. Temari was not friends with Sasuke. She had fought him exactly once, and unlike the rest of them, she hadn't grown up with him, or been his friend back when he was sane. To her, Sasuke was the lowest of the low. Someone who had betrayed their village and tried to destroy it. He wasn't really human anymore. Yes, it may have seemed cold. And maybe it was. But Temari didn't have the same perspective that the Konoha shinobi had. Sakura was placid. She was beyond the point of feeling. Her only goal now was to drink herself into a stupor, in hope that this evening hadn't happened. After the shock had passed momentarily, almost everyone decided to follow her lead. The waiter was called, and more sake was brought. To drink until they forgot. That's what they wanted. Sakura, shrieked a voice from outside. The voice shook Sakura awake. She woke with a pounding headache and a bad taste in her mouth. She had a sneaking suspicion that she wasn't the only one to have woken up feeling like crap. Oh hell, what time was it? What time had she gotten home? Who had brought her home? Thank God she had the day off today. The last thing she remembered was getting very, very drunk and blacking out. Sakura got off the couch she'd crashed on, and noticed she was still wearing the blue dress. She laughed bitterly in her head. To think that only yesterday, she'd thought that a pretty new dress would make the night perfect. How stupid. She held her head in her hands. Whoever was outside had started banging on the door. The noise was jolting through her brain. Quickly she used a nifty little jutsu to cure herself of her hangover and went to answer the door. She opened it to find an irate, yet surprisingly perky-looking Ino, holding something in her left hand. "Ino, what are you doing here?" groaned Sakura. Ino ignored her and barreled past Sakura. She flopped herself down on the couch. Sakura followed cautiously and sat down next to her. "Look, Sakura, just look." Ino thrust the object in her hand at Sakura. Sakura grabbed the object. It was today's edition of the Konoha letter. Sakura stared at it, not quite understanding what she was meant to be looking at. "Ino, what am I supposed to be looking at?" she asked the frustrated blonde. "It's just an annoying tabloid." Ino sighed in exasperation. "Read the headline. Read it out loud," she commanded. "Konoha 12 reunited. The return of Uzumaki," read Sakura. She looked at Ino, confused. "What's wrong?" "It's just another one of those stupid articles about us." Ino shot Sakura a death glare. "Now read the subheading. Drunken night at Natsuki's. Konoha's scandal." Oh, Sakura's mind clicked. She looked at the picture which graced the front page after glancing over at Ino. The blonde appeared to be trying to suffocate herself with a cushion. The photo on the front was unflattering, to say the least. It was the group of them, most in some state of intoxication. Everyone was on edge, uncomfortable. The picture made them look like they were about to scream at each other. It took up most of the page, with only a small article underneath it. Sakura started to read the article. Ino lifted her head from the cushion, and instead decided to watch Sakura for any reaction. It started off as a quiet night at one of Konoha's top-tier restaurants. But this calm reunion quickly degenerated into a drunken mess. Yesterday began with the return of long-gone shinobi, Naruto Uzumaki, 20, who looked in a red coat. Uzumaki, having left the village under mysterious circumstances, had finally come back after 4 years away from his home village. Uzumaki is the only son of Konoha's fourth Hokage, Minato Namikaze, and his wife, Kushina Uzumaki. Attending the dinner were the Konoha 12, Who's Who, page 6 to 9. Notably there were newly engaged couple, Tenten, 21, and Neji Hyuga clan prodigy. Wedding report, page 11. The other Hyuga, the elegant heiress Hinata, 20, was also there with longtime boyfriend Kiba Inuzuka, 20, their other teammate, Aburame heir Shino Aburame, 20, and Aburame's best friend, Sai, 20. Along with others, the hottest young shinobi in Konoha were ready for a catch-up session and a pleasant meal. But this dining experience wasn't pleasant for all. After an awkward start, the conversation at the table seemed to be getting heavy. After an intense story from Uzumaki, the 13 gathered shinobi proceeded to drink themselves into a sorry state. Intoxicated, old rivalries, issues and problems flared up. The evening ended with the gorgeous group getting booted out, even though the restaurant is owned by one of their families. At the dinner was Akamichi heir, Shoji and Ino Yamanaka, both 20. Awkwardly enough, their teammate, and Yamanaka's ex, the genius Shikamaru Nara, 20, was also present with his new girlfriend, the Kage's sister, Temari Sabaku, 22. Nara and Yamanaka parted on bad terms last year, so it was no surprise that after a night of drinking, Yamanaka and Nara's girlfriend, Sabaku, had a loud confrontation. Continued on page 4. Ino, do you remember what happened yesterday? Because from what I'm reading, I get the feeling Tad it didn't go so well. Sakura looked hesitantly at her friend. Ino bit her lip. She looked like she was going to go into meltdown. Go to page 4, she said. You'll find out then. Sakura hurriedly turned the page. Then turned it again. And again. How many pages on this does this stupid thing have? Exclaimed Sakura. 8 pages. Ino exploded. 8 freaking pages. 9 if you count the front page. It's a 9-page spread. With photos of everything. Everything. Sakura swore. No wonder Ino was so pissed off. She was speechless. The last time there'd been this much coverage over them was just after Naruto had left. What would the Hokage think of this? God, Sakura hoped that nothing in the paper was too bad. Otherwise Lady Tsunade was going to kill her. Ino, still fuming, waited as Sakura headed to page 4. She watched Sakura's eyebrows rose further and further upward as she read. To Naruto, being the human container for a malevolent evil demon fox spirit was generally quite unpleasant. But being the Kyuubi's Jinchuriki had its perks sometimes. The super fast healing, immense amounts of chakra, and of course, the fact that he never got hungover. Naruto wasn't much of a drinker, but whenever he had drunk, he discovered that the Kyuubi seemed to neutralize any physically harming effects of alcohol as soon as he drank it. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how he looked at it, the Kyuubi didn't seem to actually stop him getting drunk. He just didn't throw up, he couldn't get alcohol poisoning, and he never suffered a blinding headache the day after. The downside to this was he never seemed to remember what he'd done while he was under the influence. Naruto suspected that that was also the Kyuubi's doing. Naruto had woken up fully dressed, on top of his bed. It was one of those times when he was glad that his mind was drawing a blank. When he blacked out and forgot things, he didn't dream. His nightmares had always been worse than other people's, but normally, he had good dreams as well. But ever since that, well, let's just say he was no longer a fan of dreams. After showering and changing, Naruto checked his apartment for food. There wasn't any, but that was to be expected after being uninhabited for 4 years. He decided to head out for breakfast. He looked at the window. There were people out and about, so it couldn't have been that early. Ichiraku's would be open. He never did get to finish the bowl he had started eating yesterday. He'd gotten distracted. Naruto grinned at the thought and opened the door. He'd have to catch up with someone who hadn't gotten blind stinking drunk. Maybe they could tell him, huh? Naruto bent down and picked up the object sitting on his doormat. The Konoha letter. He read out loud. Since when did Konoha have a newspaper? The picture on the front of the paper caught his eye. It was him and his friends, from last night at Natsuki's. Everyone looked really angry. Why on earth were they on the front? As Naruto walked towards Ichiraku's, he skimmed the article on the front. Hey, they mentioned him, so he was one of Konoha's hottest young shinobi? Shino and Sai were best friends? Ino and Shikamaru were in a feud? Wow, he really had been gone too long. The article on the front instructed him to turn the page for more articles. Naruto tucked the newspaper under his arm and sped up. He'd saved the reading of that until he got to Ichiraku's. After all, it couldn't hurt to have a look at what the paper had to say about last night, right? He was almost done. Most of his body was movable, albeit stiff. Only his left foot was still frozen, immobile. But he was getting there. It would be quick, but it didn't really matter. He had all the time in the world. Why? Ino lamented as Sakura put down the newspaper. Why did I do that? Why did that stupid reporter have to be there with that stupid camera and write a stupid article all about it? Sakura shrugged and patted Ino on the back, who winced at Sakura's touch. It's not that bad, she said weakly. There wasn't that much detail. Ino, you know the media, they always blow everything out of proportion. Ino groaned and snatched up the paper. Turning to the appropriate page, she started to read out loud. Battle of the Blondes, Yamanaka vs. Sabaku. Continued from front page. Last night, at the Uzumaki reunion dinner, diners watched as the tension that had been building up for a year finally exploded in a drunken, rage-fueled showdown between Konoha's 2 blonde beauties, Ino Yamanaka and Tamari Sabaku. Emotions have run high between the two, ever since Yamanaka's breakup with Shikamaru Nara, resident genius of the Konoha 12. The brains meet beauty couple, who were together for 2 years, split last summer in a messy breakup caused by Nara's cheating ways. Sabaku, the Suna ambassador and sister to the Cage himself, had consistently denied rumors that she and Nara were in a relationship prior to the breakup. Following the couple's split, there were many awkward public confrontations between the new couple of Nara Sabaku and woman scorned, Yamanaka. However, in comparison to the night's argument, these were nothing. Last night had started pleasantly, albeit awkwardly. Towards the end though, the sake had loosened tongues and set feelings on the boil. By then, not all the group had remained. Taijutsu prodigy, Rock Lee, 21, had escorted a passed-out Sakura Haruno, 20, home earlier. Shino and Sai, our favorite bromance, had also departed, leaving only 4 established couples and Uzumaki. After drinking steadily the entire night, an intoxicated Yamanaka started yelling insults at Sabaku and Nara. Despite attempts from the calmer members of the group to calm her down, the situation escalated until Sabaku, who up to that point had been silent, proceeded to join in. Nara, usually level-headed, had snapped, seeming to have finally reached a point where he couldn't take Yamanaka's snipes at Sabaku anymore. The fight degenerated still until both Kunoichi, but not Nara, had started making hand signs for jutsu. Sabaku managed to pull one off, and destroyed a few tables. It was this that led to the remaining members of the group being kindly escorted off the premises. Is this recent spat between Sabaku and Yamanaka the start of all-out war? A sign of more scandal to come? Or maybe, with everyone's feelings on the table, Yamanaka and Nara can work to make up after the breakup. The article was accompanied by a spread of pictures, some from last year, some from last night. The biggest was a collage of 4 pictures from the dinner. The first was a clearly drunk Ino standing up, pointing and in the midst of saying something to Shikamaru and Tamari. The anger on her face was evident. The other 3 photos had been taken after the fight had heated up. Ino was throwing her drink at Tamari. In another, she was being held back by Choji while Tamari threatened her with a fan. The last was Tamari, Shikamaru and Ino in a shouting match, over a destroyed table and 6 shocked faces. Naruto stared at the images, stunned. There had been a lot of information in that article. He must have thought this a billion times by now, but he really had been gone a long time. At least, long enough for all his friends to pair off into happy, or in the case of Shikamaru and Ino, not so happy, couples. What if he'd never left? What if he'd stayed, left Sasuke to his own devices, instead of chasing after the late last Uchiha? He pondered the thought. Maybe he'd be the one in a happy stable relationship, not alone, like he was now. He turned the page, letting his eyes drift over the various profiles of the Konoha 12. Each profile was a paragraph about the person with a photograph. His was the first. Naruto stopped to read it. The photo was one that had clearly been taken the night before. Naruto was walking through the doors of Natsuki's wearing the red coat. Naruto couldn't help but notice that he looked quite regal in the photo. He was in motion, yet the photo was completely clear. He applauded the photographer in his head. Whoever had taken it had some skills. Everyone always said that he looked like his mother. But in this picture, he looked, dare he say it, just like his father. He let his eyes drift from the photograph to the words underneath. Naruto Uzumaki, aged 20, is the son of Konoha's legendary 4th Hokage, Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash, and his gorgeous wife, Kushina Uzumaki of Whirlpool. With both parents deceased, Naruto was an orphan, who grew from an annoying prankster into the powerful and handsome shinobi he is today. In a shock move, he deserted Konoha 4 years ago, leaving everyone he loved behind. He returned yesterday to the surprise of everyone, especially a certain pink-haired medic and even catching the eye of the taken Hyuga heiress, page 10. Notable moments. Invasion of Konoha by the Sannin Orochimaru. Invasion of Pain. Defeat of Madara Uchiha after 4th Shinobi World War. Naruto put down the paper. Surely he had more achievements than that? Powerful and handsome shinobi? Naruto started. He looked up to see that Ayame standing in front of him, ladle in one hand, the other hand on her hip. She smiled. Naruto had been rather absorbed in the article. You were reading out loud, she said. Naruto almost blushed. Huh, really? He returned her grin. I guess I didn't notice. He turned back to the front page and held the paper up in front of Ayame's face. So this, Konoha letter. When did this start up? Why is there so much on me and my friends? Ayame raised her eyebrows in disbelief. You don't know about the Konoha letter? I've been back for less than a day, Ayame. Cut me some slack here. Ah, right. She put the ladle down onto the counter. The Konoha letter, I think it started, you left just after the war, so around a month after your departure. Naruto nodded. That explained why he'd never heard of the newspaper before. He hadn't really kept up with the goings-on in Konoha during his time away. As for why you guys are splashed across the pages, well, the easiest way to put it would be to say that you guys are kind of celebrities now. It was Naruto's turn to look surprised. What? Celebrities? How? Why? Since when? He asked in rapid succession. They call you the Konoha 12. By you, I mean you, Sakura, Sai, Shino, Kiba, Hinata, Neji, Tenten, Lee, Choji, Ino and Shikamaru. Actually, this is the biggest spread on you guys that I've seen since the letter started. Must be because you're back, Naruto. Okay, but wait a second. Why? Why are we celebrities? Think about it, Naruto. A group of 12 attractive junins. Well, 11 attractive junin and 1 genin. Naruto furrowed his eyebrows. They were all junin now? Damn it, he must be the most powerful genin in the history of Konoha. Who have all done remarkable things to help Konoha. What newspaper wouldn't pounce on that? All of you are slated to become highly successful and powerful. Naruto scratched his head. Right, I don't really get it. Ayame sighed. It doesn't really matter, but maybe it would be easier just to say that you are a bunch of very interesting people, who do things that shinobi and civilians alike find interesting to read about. Naruto turned back to page with the profiles. Ayame pointed at the paragraph on him. A certain pink-haired medic? She asked. Must mean Sakura. Naruto's gaze went to Sakura's profile. Her picture was also one of her entering the restaurant. She looked tired, but still pretty. She had looked really nice in that blue dress. Isn't it great to see Sakura wearing something non-work related for once? Ayame commented with approval. Naruto was puzzled. What do you mean? Oh, nothing. It's just that in this picture, it's the first I've seen Sakura not wearing a medic's uniform in a really long time. Huh, Sakura always wore her medic uniform? She probably just really worked a lot, and stopped off at Ichiraku's for a bite to eat. Ayame turned the page for him. She pointed at a picture on page 8. Naruto's eyes followed, catching the eye of the Hyuga heiress? That's got to be Hinata. His eyes drifted over the photograph, which was shared between two people's profiles. Hinata's photo was not of her alone. It was her and Kiba, walking into Natsuki's. His arm was around her waist, and he was saying something to make her laugh. Hinata's head was tilted up slightly, in a moment of quiet laughter. Her lips were smiling, but her pale eyes seemed distant, uneasy. Even so, she looked amazing. She radiated a sense of confidence that Naruto was sure she hadn't had before. It was strange, but in the best possible way. His mind returned to the thought he'd been having earlier. Would he be where Kiba was if he'd stayed in Konoha? Or would he have Sakura on his arm? Or would nothing have changed? She's happy with him, you know. Ayame jolted him back into reality from his world of what-ifs. But she always did like you. You were oblivious though. Poor girl. Naruto thought back. The memory he visited was fuzzy. Anything that happened before he went all 9 tails tended to get jumbled up in his head. The invasion of pain. He'd been down, immobilized by the diva path. That much he knew for certain. But in the moments after, well, that was a blur. She'd rushed in to save him, knowing she would probably die. She'd said, had she really said those things? Or had he imagined it? Whatever had happened, he'd gotten angry. Angry enough to erupt straight into his 6-tailed transformation. But then, he'd met his father. Ayame sighed again, louder this time. She smiled gently when Naruto looked up at her, simultaneously turning a page. Taking a trip down memory lane? You could say that, said Naruto. He looked down at the page, only to see it full of pictures. Pictures of himself and Hinata. It wasn't anything particularly or anything. There was just a feeling of intensity about the pictures. They'd managed to capture that exact moment when they'd locked eyes the night before. Naruto had remembered that. It was brief, a fleeting glimpse into her head. He didn't know why he'd gone looking for her. She'd held his gaze, if only for the shortest amount of time possible. But that was enough. The memory was burned into his head. Like before, he didn't know why. For some reason, Kiba had been openly aggressive towards him for what Naruto presumed was the rest of the night. That hostility had also been captured on film. In one photo, it appeared to be a staring contest between Kiba and Naruto. A staring contest filled with enmity. Strangely enough, there was also a picture of Sakura passed out. Naruto didn't bother to read the article or captions which accompanied the photos. He closed the paper, and Ayame immediately took it off his hands. She opened it, reading eagerly. She seemed very into the articles. Naruto, on the other hand, had seen enough. Besides, his ramen was getting cold.
That's all for now. If you enjoy this video, then please like, share and do comments.